Hi there. Welcome to the Lifestyle Herbalist Podcast, where we hope to bring you a healthy dose of happiness. I'm your host, Dabney Vaccaro, clinical herbalist, health coach, lover of plants.
And I'm Sabrina Cooper, registered culinary holistic nutritionist and herbalist. Join us as we dive into the art of herbalism, mindfulness, and healthy lifestyle practices to help you achieve a happier and healthier life. Whether you're a seasoned herbalist or just starting your wellness journey, we're here to provide you with the insights, tips, and inspiration for a more balanced and joyful existence. So grab your favorite herbal tea, sit back, and let's get a healthy dose of happiness together.
Hey everyone, it's Dabney and Sabrina back with you today. And on the verge of International Women's Day, we have had some really great speakers talking about women's health and the hormonal changes and things that go along with just being a woman. And so today we wanted to just talk about what it's been like to be a woman and women in this world, and the strides that have come. We have evolved so much over the last century, and that we're finding our voice. And so Sabrina and I want to talk a little bit about our own personal struggles and journey, and then go from there. So my life, like, I lost people very early in life. So my grandma died, whom I just thought the world of, when I was 12. My grandpa died when I was 14, and my dad died when I was 16. So I lost some significant people very quickly in my life. And so as a result, I think I decided, as part of my values or even my belief, is that life just goes on. You keep a stiff upper lip and you just keep moving through, and you put a smile on your face and everything will be fine. Because, in the 80s, there wasn't all this streaming information and how you deal with certain things in life, emotions in life. And so we learn what we live. And so my mom kept a stiff upper lip because she's the one who lost her parents and her husband. She was trying to be strong for me and I was trying to be strong for her, but neither of us really talked really about how we were doing. And so when I met my soon-to-be my husband at the time, I was 18 when I met him. I got married when I was 20, and I was out of the house. And then at 24, I was having babies and, just moving through life. And, I was his caregiver. I was a daughter. I was a mom. I was a sister. I was all these things, but it wasn't until I got to be about 29 years of age that I really had sort of an identity crisis. And I think it was everything that had kind of molded me, maybe, that just came into play. And I thought, who in the world am I? What am I doing? Like, who is Dabney? I started asking myself all these questions. And I thought, I don't know what to do. Like, I just feel so overwhelmed with life. But again, there weren't cell phones, there wasn't internet. I didn't even talk to my mom about how I was feeling because I was embarrassed because I didn't know what to do. So I did what any person would do, is I got a part-time job and
Distractions.
Yeah, I just needed a distraction because I was a stay-at-home mom. And I just felt like I was lost in this hustle and bustle of the grind, and making dinner, wiping butts, wiping noses. And, somehow Dabney was just lost in this merry-go-round. So I said to the family, look, I need to go do something. I need to just get a part-time job on the weekends. So I went to Costco and I was giving out those little food samples on weekends because I just felt like Dabney the woman needed to emerge.
Right.
And so for me, that was my way of dealing with my midlife health crisis, my mental crisis. And I have to say, after about 9 months to a year, I thought, okay, all right, I'm good. I need to get my butt home and be with my family because that's where I want to be. But I had to get out there and do that for my own self, for my own self-worth, because I think women, by and large, don't have a lot of self-worth. We're kind of raised, when we're little, like, oh, isn't she cute? Isn't she sweet? Isn't she adorable? But boys, they're allowed to be rough and tumble and rugged and, disgusting and gross and all that. But girls just aren't allowed to do that, even if you want to be. We have to put on our princess hat. And so we're just expected to be this model of a woman when in reality, we're not, or not all the time. And so I don't know, you feel like you're wearing, for me, I felt like I was wearing a mask many times.
You had a lot of hats. It seems like you had a lot of different roles to play. And so losing yourself would be 100% understandable in this, whole journey of yours because you were like so young when everything happened, right? And
Yeah.
then your world got turned upside down, and here you are thrown into all of this stuff. You don't really know where to turn, where to go. It's not like today where we have internet and things to kind of Google and figure things out. And you had to navigate it all on your own, which is scary. And the self-confidence and the self-worth can be plays a big role in it all, right? Like it does, because then you're like, I need to live up to a certain expectation. And you're like, sometimes wonder, is it just me thinking that I need to live up to this certain
Mhm.
expectation, or is it really on me because and this is what's projected on me, right? And I know that you grew up in the South,
Yeah.
right? In Virginia.
Right. Very
So is
Southern.
that like, do you think it's more of a thing there? Like, I don't know, that Southern hospitality, they say, I don't know. Is it more evident, do you think, in that area? And that's why you felt like that pretty cute girl in certain ways you had to be and present yourself? Would that be part
I
of the
think,
role as well? Or do
I
you think
think
that like your
probably.
surroundings?
I think it could be. We're also in the Bible Belt. So, there's this religious part of, living in the South too, where you're supposed to be really good and you're always supposed to do the right thing. You're supposed to say the right thing. And so there's these expectations in how you're supposed to present yourself in public. Now, behind closed doors, you could be somebody different, but in the public, you had to present yourself in a particular way. And that's a lot of stress and pressure. And to be up on a pedestal, man, it's pretty lonely if you're up there like by yourself thinking you have to be perfect because newsflash, we all suck. We all are imperfect,
That's right.
and we have our
Perfectly
days where
imperfect.
perfectly imperfect. We have our days where it's just hard to be human. And when you're projecting, for my kids, and I regret like the one of the biggest things I regret when I was raising my kids is I wasn't vulnerable with them to tell them, man, mommy should have said that, or I really messed up on that. But I just played it off, and I just kept pretending like I was the perfect person and I was always doing the right thing because that's what I thought I had to do. I thought I had to be this perfect role model for my girls. And in reality, I should have been more vulnerable to show them that it's okay to mess up. This is how we go from here, instead of trying to blow smoke and mirrors and pretending that everything was perfect all the time because it's too hard. It was a lot of work.
And that it's funny you say being perfect because my mom was raised by a father who was a general in the Mexican army. So she had all these rules and all these things that were, very regimented, and if they were sitting at the table and something was wrong, they'd be like, he'd tell them to stay, and the person who did something wrong, he wouldn't say it at the moment. And then he would make them sit and he would pull out the little manner book and he'd tell them what they did wrong and how they had to correct it. And so she grew up very regimented, very neat and organized. She was a nuclear physicist, very study, study, study. And I think that's how she distracted herself, was by studying. So when I grew up, that was kind of projected on me as well. It was like, be very good, polite, don't, use your manners, this, that, and the other thing, which I think manners does play a role in life. There has to be some sense, but not like so rigid that you can't kind of bend the rules a little bit. But I would go to school and I would get so paranoid about getting dirty in my clothes, and I would start crying that the teachers would call my mom, and say, please, could you send Sabrina in play clothes? My mom's like, that is her play. Those are her play clothes. And I'm not going to kill her. I'm not going to get mad at her. It's in her mind. But I was so worried about not being that perfect little mold
Mm-hmm.
that I thought that she wanted me to be, or they wanted me to be, right? So it's interesting how that feeds, and how you said like being more vulnerable. And I never saw her cry. I never saw her get emotional. She lost her father when I was only like 2 years old, and I never saw her get emotional. She closed the door and have her emotions, I guess. And so it's interesting that that I didn't see that part of my mom ever, that warmth, that how can I say it? That womanly, like, I don't know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like that nurturing, cry in front of you, kind of person, show your emotions, wear your heart on their sleeve kind of person. And I became sort of like that, very like,
You have to be strong instead of soft. You can't be
exactly.
soft. Yeah, yeah. And it was, I mean, I'm sure it was all in my head. Like, nobody ever told me I had to do that. It was just something I just believed that I had to be. Somehow along the line, I started to think that I had to, be this perfect person. And I think maybe part of it is that my love language is words of affirmation. So if I do something well, I get a compliment. And so it was me trying to be um, and act in a way that I would get a compliment or that somebody would be pleased.
Right.
A people pleaser, if you will. That is me still to this point. But boy, going through menopause, we'll get to that in a little bit. But that's a whole nother level. Like, you don't give a crap as much anymore. And it's like, you don't like what I'm wearing. Don't look at it. It's okay.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's funny. Or someone comes into your world and you're like, oh, you don't realize that you're a certain way, and then you're just think it's kind of that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way I've always done it. That's the way my parents did it. That's the way this did it. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden someone comes in your world and you're like, why are you so like this is too meticulous or this is this? And then you're like, oh, yeah, and it's so to me it's fascinating. I've actually become a lot more relaxed. Maybe it is because I'm in menopause as well. And I feel sometimes I'm like, I can get to it. But there's still moments where I'm a little bit like I need things in order. When there's too much chaos, I get a little in like, oh gosh, what's happening? But I'm not as paranoid. Even with my clothes, like I might have a spot or something. I'm like, oh well, that's just life.
Yep.
Shows I was doing stuff like washing the dog earlier and I'm like, whatever, and I'm wet but I made it and that's okay. Like it's all part of life. And I think it's important to show that side of everybody. And I part of this thing when you and I came on, we thought, let's just talk about how far we've come as women and people, right? Because people are taking stands, they're using their voice, they have a lot more accessibility to things. And so, you know, we're able to just be who we are now without slinking in behind like a facade or putting this mask on. And we're able to say, hey, you know what, today I'm not having a really great day, and this is why. Or, where before we would just put on that happy face and pretend like everything was okay. And I'm not saying that all of us aren't like that because there still are many people who struggle with that, right? Many people still struggle with putting on a happy face and trying to
Yeah.
be someone that they're not or someone that they think that they should be,
Right.
which causes a lot of the mental health in the world, right? So it's really a big struggle if you can overcome all those things that, start to have that kind of free flowing attitude. And
Yeah. What about you, Sabrina? How have you struggled or have things just been so dynamic?
I wish, I wish life, yeah, it might look like that on the outside. Maybe I'm
Right.
not doing such a good job at just putting my heart. No, you know what? I have struggled in many ways, with, with growth. I think, I was just with a friend the other day and I said to her, geez, like, we've gone through so much and it's interesting, like now we're like kids today, sometimes like we notice that kids have a lot more accessible to them, or they're able, like their parents are able to do more. Like we basically, like you said, we just took on things, doing it ourselves, figuring it out, critical thinking. If something didn't work, we tried to fix it without running, like, I don't know how this works. Like, and, someone calling someone or, and so I feel like for me, my struggle was at a young age, I had a certain level of getting my innocence taken from me. I'll put it lightly, and when I was in my youth, 13. And I think that played a big role because that was something that was so sacred to me. And so that played a huge role moving forward. I did lose a lot of self-love, self-respect, self-confidence, didn't feel worth anything. I felt worthless for a long time, but I still moved forward. in the best way I knew how. And I didn't talk about it. I didn't tell anybody about it. Nobody knew that this had happened. Nobody, it was all hush hush, don't say anything. It was almost like it was my fault. It was guilt. And so that was big thing for me. And then finally, like, I didn't think I would ever feel loved in that sense, and then when I met my husband, I really felt that sense of love and that real love for me as a person, not who, like, um physically, right? More like mentally, like that nurturing feeling that I had longed for. And so we went through that. And then when we tried to have children, we couldn't have children. So that was a whole nother topic of discussion. Maybe one day we'll have a topic on that, and the struggles of going through fertility treatments and how that plays a role on your hormones and your mental state. And I felt like a crazy, but where everybody else was having children and moving forward, all my friends, I was like struggling, and nobody knew what to say because everybody, like none of their friends, nobody's gone through that. And so it was really hard to say like, well, you just keep trying. Well, I am, and it's not happening. And it's not going to happen. And this is just the way it is. Or you get the, like, you should adopt, or you should have all these things that people would say to you that you're like, it's very difficult to hear. Right. And the insensitivity, and like, they're trying to be nice and helpful. But so
Yeah.
that was a whole struggle for
Yeah.
me, and I had to put on that happy face again, and I would get angry. I would be
Yeah.
like, stop asking me how I'm doing, don't ask me like what's going on, because it's not happening. And I would just think I just assumed people were asking me about me having children. When are you going to have children? But that wasn't what they were asking. They genuinely just wanted to know how I was. And
Oh,
I would be like, because the hormones,
mhm,
right, everything was
mhm.
affected. So, I too distracted. I did, my distractions were work as well. Keeping busy with courses, studying, and also working out and taking care of my health. That was always thing, because for a little while I was like, what did I do wrong? I felt all this guilt. And I think I became a workout holic, I would say, because that's all I would want to do, to keep myself distracted. And so moving forward, I just feel like now I'm okay with everything. I've come to grips, and I've come to head with it. And we started volunteering at an organization also because this firstly came out of me saying, well, if I'm not going to have kids, I don't want people to be like, well, it must be nice. Because I used to hear that, it must be nice not to have kids. Like, you can do this, you can do that. And I'd be like, but the
Yeah.
struggles were real.
Yeah.
And it was a tough decision. It was like grieving. I mean, you're, as a
Yeah.
woman, you're supposed to have, like, you're supposed to have children. You want to have children, you want to nourish. I did want to have that. I wanted
Mhm.
that so much. And so it was a hard choice. Um, but I decided to give back to many children, and do as much as I could for my cousins' kids, because I don't have siblings. So like my family, and help kids in different ways, and show them like, even though I don't have kids, I can also do a lot of goodwill and a lot of good things. I'm not selfishly just keeping
You
into
can love
myself.
other people's children.
Yeah,
And you
exactly.
do
So
it
I have
well.
lots of
You do it well.
godchildren, all of a
Mhm.
sudden you become a godparent to so many, which I take as an honor, because I guess people trust you, right? Which is a big thing. So if
Yeah.
people trust you with their kids, if everything, God forbid, something should happen, then I feel like it's a very big compliment. So
Mhm.
yeah, I guess I went off on a tangent, but yes, so that's me, and getting over everything. And so yeah, I said, I think you're misunderstood. I just said that the other day. I said, sometimes your reactions come from being misunderstood, because people have been through so much that you don't know, right? So if there's a reaction or something, it's something that that person maybe has felt or has bubbled up, or has done so much that if you say something and they're like, come on, really, like,
Yeah.
because, but then I say, in someone's world, something small, maybe to them, to you, maybe very big to them, right? So you just have to take it with that, and I've learned that.
Yeah. Good advice. Because we all do come from different places and we view the world through different lenses because we've walked in different shoes, different paths. And sometimes people get activated, a certain memory, it gets activated when they hear something or there's a conversation about something and it just brings back a memory that may not have been so lovely, and so then they respond in a way that isn't so lovely.
And
So,
exactly. And we said, like, you should have the right, or you should have the will to just to have that emotion, right? So if if, I know the holidays can be hard for people, like Mother's Day, Father's Day, all these things. It's not always joyful, right? Like a love day, Valentine's Day. It's not always about the love. Sometimes people aren't so happy on that day, and if they want to retreat or handle that holiday as they will, then let them handle that holiday on their will, because you don't know why it's triggering to them, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
The one thing we don't do well as a society is we don't allow people to grieve because it upsets us. We're not really
think,
thinking about the other person. It's like, well, stop crying because it bothers me. I mean, that's what they're thinking. That's not what they're saying. But we try to comfort them and we tell them silly things like it'll be okay. Well, of course it'll be okay eventually, but right now it doesn't feel okay. And they try to give silly advice like, maybe you should just go do this, or maybe you should. Everybody just shoulds on everybody, and instead of just letting somebody grieve, we
yeah.
just don't honor the cycles of grief like we should. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just even like physical, like it's not grief of even like the loss of a death of someone. It could be the loss of just a partner, like in the sense like they've divorced, or it could just be
Well,
anything,
and
right?
you
It-
were grieving the loss of not being able to be a mother, and
right.
you should be able to grieve that in any way that you needed to in order to get through it.
Yeah, and
We don't allow
and
people to honor. We don't honor people's wishes in the way that they need to grieve, no matter what it's for.
yeah, that's
So,
true. And I think, you're right. Like we have to give each other the time. And I think in the last 3 years, we've been through a lot of grief. My husband more so, but I mean, directly, like my mother-in-law, father-in-law, my brother, I'll call him my brother, my brother-in-law. And so, watching the cycles, and what I learned is everybody grieves differently.
um,
So the you can't, there's no right or wrong way to grieve either, right? So if someone decides that they want to dance and laugh and that's how they're getting through it, and you're like, what the heck? Well, that's them releasing. That's them. Eventually maybe they'll cry, maybe they'll fall apart, maybe they won't, maybe that's just the way it is, or some people will distract with exercise or distract, right?
yeah,
Some people self-sabotage until they kind of snap out of it and go, oh my gosh,
yeah,
I I wouldn't want this, like the person wouldn't want this or whatever it is, right? Like, so I think, we just have to respect that. You're right. We just have to respect everybody and let them do
yeah.
it their
My well-meaning person had given me these pamphlets on grief, and every so often they would drop one off about grief and where I should be or whatever. And anyway, I got to the point I started reading the first one, and it upset me so much. And then I didn't, and I started reading the second one, and I didn't like it any better. But basically, it made me really analyze my own grief system and what I was going through. And I wasn't going through the same sequence that these pamphlets were recommending or saying, or these are it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lifestyle Herbalist podcast today. We're happy that you're here. We would love to hear from you. Let us know how we are doing. If there's content in our podcast that resonate with you or someone that you know, please feel free to share with them this information. Be sure to subscribe so that you can follow all of our content. With that, let's get back to the show.
And so I started, like, it stressed me out. Like, I'm not doing this right, or something's wrong. And I don't know, it didn't settle well with me. So I just threw them all away, and I just refused to read any more of them because, my grief is my grief. My grief isn't someone else's grief. And I'll eventually get through it. I mean, I didn't stay stuck, but there's times that you just need to know and be honor your own self and know this is what's good for me. And
yeah,
regardless of what anybody else thinks you should do.
it's true. And I know one of our guests, Dr. Vashna, had said, like, even in health and in grief, it's like there's no one size fits all. Right?
Mhm.
So it's there, we're not all the same. So what works for somebody doesn't always work for somebody else. And I always tell that to my clients too when I'm doing nutrition things. I'm like, because
Definitely.
it's not, it's there could be different reactions. There could be something that's not really what you need. You might be stronger in one area than you are in another. Like your chakras might, it's all different things that can,
Yep.
unfold. And so it's all part and parcel, like not one, like one size does not fit all. And I mean, we're like that. I mean, we all don't wear the same shoe, right?
Nope.
Size, like we don't, so we're all different. Like, I mean, a size small for me might be like fit a little bit looser than a size small for somebody else. And, but it's still size small. It's just, it's not, it's different. You know what I mean? It's all going to fit differently. So, that makes sense. But, so yeah, so I just, as we come up to this Women's International Day, I think it's phenomenal to see like the changes that are happening over the years. Are they in the positive? I don't know. We'll have to see what this new generation brings. I saw a woman the other day celebrate 102 years old, and I thought to myself, like,
Wow.
102. I'm like, the things in that century, like, what did she like? What was she?
A lot of
She's like,
stories. She's got a
right?
lot of stories to
And you were
share.
saying that the
Yeah.
stories we should
Yeah.
listen.
So many stories. Yeah, I'll never forget. I was at a lamb roast. I don't eat lamb, but I was at a lamb roast, and this fellow that I've known for a long time, he was there with his mother, who was in her then upper 80s. And he would call his two daughters over, and they were in their late teens, early 20s, but he would call them over, and he says, "Girls, girls, sit down, sit down. Ask your grandma to tell you a story." And so he just really impacted me, and I thought, wow, that's amazing, because he wants his daughters to know their grandmother, and he wants them to know the stories she had, what it was like when she was little or when she first got married. And actually I was just all in. Like, I felt like a little kid there myself, sitting at her feet, just listening to her stories, because she was a good storyteller. And so it just reminded me, like, yeah, we don't sit and listen to the stories. Like, my grandma, like I said, she died when I was 12. My dad died when I was 16. And I never really got to hear many of the stories. Like, I remember some things my dad told me when he was a boy, but I mean, when you're a kid, you're only halfway listened. But I didn't really get a chance to know my dad in a way that I would have liked to as an adult. And unfortunately, we just tend to not really listen or give the proper respect to our elderly. And I have this one patient. He was in World War II. He was actually on the beaches of Normandy. He is a very interesting man. He is now 100. But he has told me a few stories of his life, when he's been in the dental chair, and just the sweetest man. But gosh, just to hear the stories of what it was like when, and women in particular, the struggles that they've had to deal with, the things they've had to go through, some of the things that they've had to put up with, because they were married in a time when divorce wasn't really a thing. And so, yeah, just the society and the societal things were just so different. In the 40s and 50s, there was segregation. There was just all these things that happened throughout time that older people had lived through that we didn't. And just to hear their stories can be really amazing.
That I used to volunteer with my dog at a long-term care. And there were a lot of elderly.
Mhm.
And so listening to the stories, because they would have pictures, so I like engage with them, because obviously the dog can't talk. They're mostly just petting, the dog, because it's pet therapy, dog therapy. So it was like therapy for me, because I would look around the room and I would be like, oh, like, is that your dog? Or is like that or oh, you were a nurse. And then they would tell me all about like nursing back in the day. And because a lot of times their memory, their long-term memory is very good. It's their
Mhm.
short-term memory that will go, right? So they just like, they'll tell me all these beautiful stories. And I loved listening and learning like you. It was like story time every time I would go in. And then my phone, sorry. And then I was upset when it was like, if they were gone, because sometimes, they would pass
Oh,
away or whatever.
right.
Those stories would forever stick with me, some of them, like I would be like, oh, I remember so and so told me this story, or, they were just so treating them like people, right? And I think it's important. So my question to you is, I know you have grandchildren, so are you sharing your stories? Are you putting a little time capsule together, little recordings?
Mm,
Because as you said, sometimes they're not really paying attention when they're that, young, because I know they're quite young right now, but
right.
will you like be
Yeah,
putting
I
together a
have
little
not,
book?
Sabrina, but maybe I should be putting some things together to show them when they get to be a little bit older. My oldest right now is going to be 4 next month, so he still wants to play cars with Gigi. So that's what we do is we play a lot of trucks and cars. um, but there'll be a time when I want to, share the stories of my life with him, so that he gets to know what things were like before COVID, because he was born in COVID.
Oh,
So he won't know what life was like before COVID.
yeah.
So that'll be interesting to tell him how things used to be, and, even before the internet. And I mean, when I grew up, there was one channel on our TV. And if it was a sunny day, it was great. And if it was a cloudy day, it may not be so great.
Yeah. I feel like I was in those transitional years where it was like we had the antenna for a little while, but then like we had this other thing and eventually. So I was in those like little transitional
Mhm.
years of things like that. But I just think it is really important, like even recipes, like your favorite recipes and
Mhm.
putting them in a book for your kid, like your grandkid and your kids,
Yeah.
because, I mean, you're still very young and but it's just like, it's nice to have like your moms and everything. I
Yeah.
just think there's something special about it. And, we can't lose fact that all these people before us have paved the way for us,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
a lot of these women who, we recognize this coming week um did that for in a lot of cases, right? Like they didn't have a voice, and now we're standing up for them, and a lot of women still don't have a voice in many countries. So we have to remember how blessed and lucky we are, um, in our countries, in our ways, even though some days we may feel small in the big grand scheme of things, but we have to realize, like, we actually are very fortunate in
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah. And even though our younger listeners, if you feel like it's harder for you to find a voice, wait until menopause. Your voice gets louder and you stop caring quite so much. And so I think I hit menopause about 47 years of age. There's just a lot of stress going on in my life. And it was a point where I just thought, and my cousin Cindy, she was about the same place as me. She's about like 6 months older than me, but she and I were paralleling about our same journeys. And, at some point, you just like, you know, I really don't care. This people pleaser in me just kind of like had an outer body experience, and it's kind of somewhat left the building. She emerges from time to time, but the people pleaser in me is not quite as strong as she used to be. And I think it really has to do with that shift. And so, for some reason, our countries and our women seem to want to delay menopause because of the symptoms and the things that it can create. But it's just a rebirth. It's shelling out the old and in with the new. And the new is pretty darn good. So, for any of those out there, any listeners out there who are thinking about, don't want to get older, like it's really quite grand. I love where I am in life. I thought 40 was great. Being in my 40s was great. And I wasn't really looking forward to being in my 50s, but I just turned 57 and I'm loving it. Like it's great. Like I love it. Like I just feel like I've just rebirthed myself in so many ways.
Sounds like you've taken a lot of time and self-care to get to this point, and allowing yourself to be who you are and finding the Dabney again, and being in connected with Dabney, and a new, maybe a two,
A new
like I don't know,
version of myself.
1.0, a new version of Dabney, but it's like, the old Dabney, or is still somewhere in there, but it's like, because you never want to let go of that person, because that's who made you today.
Oh,
But at the
definitely.
same time, it's like you're morphing into something greater, and
Oh,
letting
and
your
you're
voice actually be greater and who you are, which is
right.
amazing.
Yeah. maybe just more a vibrant me, I was more a subdued me, and I think I'm more vibrant. Like my colors are just more brilliant now than
Outspoken.
before.
Well, I mean, even I've said this, I think I said it in one of our first podcasts when we met each other, like through our studies. I remember like very quiet and like very like, different. And
Mhm.
now there's just this lightness and this glow to you and this like, I don't know, it's different. I see like a different Dabney than it's probably been almost 10 years
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Probably close to
ish,
10 years ish.
9, 8,
Mhm.
9, yeah.
9 years.
And so, and I think it's nice that you have this time now and that you're coming out of this, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. It's been great.
love it.
Can't wait to see what else happens.
I know.
As this journey continues, I got a front seat, so we'll see.
Well, if it's any testament to what the two of us, I know everybody, a lot of our listeners out there, you've all probably been through, hell and back, as they say, or whatever, right? Or what's that one song? My husband always says, like, you have to go to hell before you get to heaven or something like that, or you
Oh,
have to go through hell to go through heaven. There's a song.
okay.
Anyway, but I feel like a lot of us sometimes feel that way, and all these little things that come and hit us are always little, I now have realized that they're little learning lessons. They're little lessons that the greater universe sends us. And once we can like get through those lessons and we pass with flying colors, the universe doesn't send them anymore. All of a sudden they become less and less. And you're
Great,
like,
great,
because they
great,
realize that, hey, you're able to manage this now. You've passed. You know how to handle
great,
yourself, or you know how to
great.
get through that without reacting or without this or without that.
Yeah, and
So
I always hated it when I failed. It's like, damn it, I'm gonna have to do that again. Shit.
So yeah, exactly. So all these tests that we've gone through, and now we're like, now because you're like, oh, I don't care. Then they're like, you learned, yay! I don't
Yeah,
have to send you any more tests for you to
yeah.
pass or
Great,
fail.
great.
So now you've passed and you can continue living.
Yeah,
So
continue on to the
um,
next thing.
that's it. So just enjoy life, I guess. And for all the women out there, let's think of all the women who have gone before us, all the stories that they've told, all the stories they left behind, and some of the stories that they were not able to tell. So let's honor all the women this week.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. And listen to those stories.
Yeah. And tell your story.
Tell your story. Yes, be sure to tell your story. It's important. Your story is unique to you.
Oh, and I should say one last thing because I wanted to say it. But when you tell a story, you'll realize that you're not alone either. Sometimes you're afraid to share your story because you're like, it might be like this, or people will think this of you. But you know what? Guarantee that you're not alone, and someone has had something similar or that they'll share right back. So it gives them the opportunity to share.
Yeah, for real. All
On
right.
that note,
Yeah,
we'll see you at our next episode. We have some special guests coming up. We're lining up, and if anybody wants to be a guest on our show, just reach out to Dabney and I.
sounds great.
All
Adios.
right. Have a good day.